Welcome to Behold. I'm Beth Whitney, and today I have a special guest, a good friend of mine, pastor, doctor, et cetera, Josh Lane. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. That sounds a lot more impressive than I think it really is.
Well, you pastor at Northside Church in Sacramento in the Natomas area.
Yeah.
You also lead Venture Church Network's Northern California, Nevada.
That's
correct?
me as well. Yes.
What else do you do?
I do in my spare time.
Yeah.
In my spare time, other than having what it feels like it's sometimes 2 full-time jobs.
Yes.
I do a lot. I got married not too long ago.
Yes.
And so enjoying
Congratulations.
the married life to a teacher. So she's I'm on a teacher schedule now.
Yes.
And so that's a whole nother world.
Yep.
And so we love those teachers.
Yep. They're amazing. They work so hard.
They work so hard.
Yep.
She's got a first grade teacher. I'm like, after like 5 minutes with 30 first graders, I'm like, I'm out of ideas.
Yeah, bye-bye.
I'm out of ideas. And so I don't know how they do it all day long.
Yes.
Lover of Jesus, and I love the church. I love the church local. I love the church regional. Mm-hmm. Love the church global.
Yeah.
And
Tell us something fun about yourself.
Yeah, something fun about myself. I do the Lego.
Yep.
I do the Lego flipping, which is fun. I bake. I love baking. That's kind of something I do in my spare time. But probably about, what was it now? 9 years ago now. 9 years ago, I did the Camino de Santiago, which is the pilgrimage across Spain.
That's
it starts
so cool.
in Saint Jean Pied de Port and walked 500 miles. Across the top of Spain.
There's a song about walking 500 miles.
No. See, that's the big thing. The song is walking 1,000 miles.
Oh.
Yeah, that's the misconception.
That's right.
About the song.
500 and 500 more. You're right.
Yeah, actually, ironically enough, I met somebody, a friend of mine now, on the Camino, and then he was trying to decide whether to get engaged or not.
Oh.
And so we had some really good conversations about marriage and about engagement. He was a Christian, what that means. About halfway through the Camino, he decided, yeah, I'm in. And so he started walking faster, and that's the last I saw of him. He goes home, he gets engaged, and they get married.
Yeah.
I go into their wedding. At their wedding, they play by Sleeping at Last.
Yes.
The rendition is very beautiful of I Want to Be. And it was like, oh, so sweet. He walked 500 miles. I'm like, but he actually would need to go back and do it again. Because, he still hasn't walked 1,000 miles for her. So
That's so cool.
But yeah, it was really great. It's a pilgrimage, a metaphor for life.
You should write a book.
People have written books about the
I bet
Camino.
they have.
Yeah, they
I bet
have. I've read none of them.
I've read some of the Walk West, which is in the 70s, a guy who the Walk Across America. Anyway.
Oh, yeah.
Fascinating. Super
fascinating.
fascinating.
That one I don't know. But yeah, thousands of people are doing this. And so it's just really great community.
Yeah.
And a really cool experience. Just you wake up and you walk.
You walk.
And then you go to bed and you wake up the next day and you walk again.
Wow.
And you keep doing that for 5 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah, it's really powerful.
So almost a marathon a day, give or take?
Not quite a marathon a day. You're going about 17, 18 miles.
Oh, not quite a marathon. Just 2/3 of a marathon.
Yeah, with a backpack.
Josh, today we're going to talk about narcissism,
yes,
which you wrote your dissertation on.
Correct.
And it's going to be a great conversation. I hope those of you listening are fascinated and just get a little more education of what narcissism is and isn't.
That's the hope.
Here we go.
All right.
Hey, Josh.
Hey, Beth, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing fantastically well. Thank you for asking.
Wow,
Yeah,
fantastically
well.
It must be in the water or something.
No, well, are you feeling fantastically well?
Sure.
Okay, then it is in the water.
Great.
If you're not, then it's not in the water.
I love it. Hey, we get to have a fun conversation today.
Yeah.
But you are our second repeat guest.
Whoa.
Behind the one and only Jim Culp.
So
he no longer has bragging rights over you.
Yeah, but that's my life. I follow Jim wherever he goes. So
Same.
It's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay.
So hopefully he'll watch this and then just feel blessed.
Yeah.
And highly. I'm done.
he will feel blessed. Yeah.
Blessed and highly favored. That's what I was trying to say.
If Jim's been here twice, I'm in good company.
You are in good company.
Yeah, he's a good guy.
Well, thanks for being here. Let's jump right in.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're going to start with story time.
Okay.
You're going to tell us a story about where we get the idea of narcissism.
Oh, yes, for sure. So narcissism has become quite the popular term.
It's like a buzzword.
It is a buzzword. It is a buzzword. But like every buzzword, it comes from somewhere. And it comes from the myth of Narcissus. And I think that, with the story, it helps actually explain what narcissism is.
Yes.
So Narcissus was born with great beauty. The prophecy about him was that he would live to a ripe old age, as long as he did not discover his beauty, basically.
Okay.
And so because of that, everybody wanted to be with Narcissus. Everyone wanted to love him, and he rejected all of their love.
Oh.
And so, I know. The one particular one that stands out is Echo. Echo was a nymph, and she could only repeat the last thing that was ever said to her. And so she was a bit of stalking him one day, and she tried to have a conversation, but couldn't, and then tried to embrace him, but he rejected her, as he rejected everybody. So the judgment on that was Nemesis, a goddess. Had it so that Narcissus would come across his reflection.
Okay.
And in the pool, he saw his reflection and never looked away, because he was captured by what he saw.
Oh.
Yeah. And so, as the myth goes, depending on which one you read, the one out of Ovid's Metamorphosis, it's that he dies. He just slowly sinks into the pool, and then a flower rises up. So there's this death and rebirth kind of thing. The Narcissus flower rises up in its place, and so that's where we get the term Narcissus from, and we apply it everywhere.
That is so interesting. It kind of is like aha moment, right?
Yeah.
For sure. So because it's a buzzword,
Sure.
and is being used incorrectly.
Yeah. I think so.
Give us a working definition.
Yeah, well, the term narcissist has become sort of a junk drawer term, right? So it just seems that everything, all sorts of, like we say, different personality traits or disorders or whatever they would be, fall under like narcissism. And even if you listen to a conversation, it's almost like the culmination of a diagnosis. And somebody will just say, well, they're just such a narcissist. And it can even be used as like a way of like transitioning to another topic, right? So, they're such a narcissist, and we're on to the next thing. But when I started doing some research on it, I was really curious, like what do you mean by that? When you say narcissist, what do you mean? And I found that people were using narcissism synonymously with a lot of other terms, like arrogance, pride, sort of self-love. Like they're so consumed with themselves, they're so selfish, they're such a narcissist. And so then I began to ask, like, is that the same? Is arrogance the same? Is that synonymous with narcissism?
Oh.
Is pride the synonymous with narcissism? Is self-love or selfishness, is that synonymous with narcissism? And so in that I did a lot of reading, and I had to come up with a working definition.
Yeah.
And my definition, so Diane Langberg, she's done a lot of work in this. So her definition is that narcissism at its core is the preservation of myself as good and great. And there's no agreement when all of these people that are writing narcissism, there's no agreement on any sort of definition. And so I really liked her definition and a lot of her work. And so then I for my work, I just did a modified version of that, which is that narcissism is the protection and promotion of the false self as good and great to the detriment of the true self.
Okay.
So then with what she did, I just kind of broke it out into like true self versus false self. And then instead of the preservation is the protection and promotion of the false self as good and great to the detriment of the true self.
Okay. Let people mull on that for a second.
Yeah.
That's helpful, because then we think of, because we're using it, they're such a narcissist.
Yeah, correct.
So explain the difference between like an arrogant person and someone who actually is a narcissist.
Yeah. So what happens with narcissism? So you're going back to the myth of Narcissus, is that a lot of people think like, oh, he loved himself so much he could not look away, and that's where they get this idea of selfishness or self-love. That narcissists are so self-absorbed, but in reality, actually, when you read the myth of narcissists, which I would encourage you to do, what you find out is that he doesn't think he's looking at himself. He thinks he's looking at somebody else, and it's very clear. He says things like, when I cry, I see you cry. I can tell that you want, like by the look in your eyes, I can tell that you want to be held. I'm paraphrasing now, but every time I reach out to hold you, you disappear.
Wow.
Every time I go out to kiss you, you disappear. Mm-hmm. So Narcissus did not fall in love with himself. He actually fell in love with the reflection of himself, and that's the big difference. Mm-hmm. Is that he felt, to use the terminology we used before, he fell in love with his false self, all while rejecting his true self. So really, a lot of times with narcissism, I think it's rooted in the false self. And by the way, I say all this. I'm not a psychologist.
Right.
This is not my degree.
Right,
I'm a pastor of a church. Right. But this is just from what I read. And so narcissism it exists on this spectrum. So as you look through these things, we all have parts of them in us, which is probably the most concerning. And so really, when you think about the difference between like an arrogant person or a narcissist, I go, well, one's rooted in maybe the true self and one's rooted in the false self.
So an arrogant person maybe is focusing on the good things that are true about themselves and just maybe boasting in those things.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I'm really good at...
Yeah, and whatever that is, and maybe they are. They're really good at that. Right. Like the example that I like to use is, so if somebody's the smartest person in the room, they know they're the smartest person in the room. Everybody else knows they're the smartest person in the room. And what they want to do is make sure that everybody knows that, and they continue to reinforce that.
Okay.
And even think of themselves as more valuable than other people because they're smarter than everybody else. They're probably just arrogant.
Sure.
The narcissist would tend to think he's the smartest person in the room. Everybody knows that he's not the smartest person in the room, right? And he's working really hard to make sure that everybody thinks that he's the smartest person in the room.
Okay.
So one's based in reality, it's true they are, or one's based in the false self. They're not, but they think they are, and they want to make sure that everybody else thinks that too.
That's really clarifying. That helps
good. Hopefully helpful. Yeah.
Kind of grasp the difference between those two things.
Good.
Now, you said there's some disagreement on the definitions of narcissism.
Correct.
But there is some agreement on the traits. So what are the traits? You said there's 9?
Yeah. Okay. So I use for my research, I use the DSM-5 to not to do any sort of diagnosis, just because it had a list of traits that almost everybody could agree these traits are present in narcissism. Okay. So it's like a bunch of bakers that couldn't agree on what makes a cookie. Yeah. But they could agree on what are the general ingredients of said cookie, right? So butter, flour, these sorts of things. And so the DSM-5 has 9 of them. And those, there are 9 that are, they would say are prevalent. If they're prevalent, and with the DSM-5 says if you have 5 out of the 9, you're probably working with a personality disorder. I didn't worry about that. Not trying to diagnose
you're not diagnosing.
No, not trying to diagnose anybody.
We're not using the DSM-5 as like a guidebook.
No,
it just helps you understand the traits that pretty much everyone agrees on.
Yeah,
so what are they?
Inside and outside the church.
Yes.
People agree that these. So the 9 are, they have a grandiose sense of self-importance.
Okay.
So they exaggerate their achievements and talents, expect others to recognize them as superior without actually achieving anything.
Okay.
This would be the rookie of the year that wants to be treated like a Hall of Famer. He's done nothing.
Yeah.
But he's expected to be recognized on potential, right? And to be praised for potential. The second is they're preoccupied with fantasies of unlimited success, power, and brilliance and beauty.
Okay.
Yeah. So
sounds like a Disney princess.
Yeah, and it doesn't get any better, right? The third is that they believe that they're special and unique, and can only be understood, and should really only associate with other special and unique people.
Okay.
Yeah. The fourth is that they require excessive admiration. And really, this is if their false self is true, then it should be praised.
Yeah.
And so then the praise is actually a way to affirm their false self. That's why they need it, is because it actually helps protect and promote the praise of their false self, helps protect and promote it. The fifth is that they have a sense of entitlement.
Okay.
And we've seen this all the time, right? Is that they're special, so that they should be treated as special. So their special treatment that they're owed is actually just an affirmation of their special status.
Yes.
Right. Which is why they don't necessarily see it as we would say, entitlement. They go, no. I'm not entitled. I'm special. I'm being treated specially. That makes sense.
Sure.
So the six is they're exploitive in relationships.
Okay.
Yeah, they just use relationships for what they can produce for them, which is why sometimes people think that two narcissists can't coexist, and that's not true. They can coexist.
They just exploit each other.
They only exist as long as they're exploiting each other, and the second they stop exploiting, the moment that one relationship stops being beneficial to them, to the one person, then the relationship's over, and so. Yeah, as if you're running with a narcissist. Now, narcissists aren't the only ones that exploit relationships, right? But it is common with, So relationships are a means to an end. Yeah.
Okay.
The other is that they lack empathy. They're unwilling to connect with the pain of anybody else.
Okay.
This is the one, the lacking of empathy, from what I've seen and from what I've read, is the most prevalent of them all. So that's actually the one that really kind of triggers everything else, is that they have lack of empathy. And truth be told, it makes sense.
Yeah.
They can't connect with their own pain. And so they have no shot at connecting with the pain of another.
Sure.
Nor would they be able to see how their actions have caused great pain to other people.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you've ever been in the wake of a narcissist, do they not see all of this death and destruction that lays in their wake? And the answer would be no. They don't. Yeah, no, they don't. No, because they lack empathy. The eighth one is that they're envious of others. They're often envious of others, and they believe that others are envious of them.
Oh.
Yeah, of course, right? Because there's always
if only everyone could be like me.
Yes, but they're also envious. They're very competitive. That's the idea, is that because it's their false self pitted against the false self of other people.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the last one is then they show, which is what most people think, they show arrogant and haughty and prideful behavior. And so that's the ninth one is what most people think of when they think narcissism.
Right.
That's probably the last one, but yeah. But it makes sense. And once again, like if your false self is true, I'd be arrogant too. I'd be arrogant too, maybe.
If I have this created being or created idea of what I am.
Correct, yeah.
I'm pretty awesome because I'm whatever I've imagined in my own mind.
Correct. Yeah.
Yuck.
No, truth be told, you do enough reading on it, which I've done probably far too much reading on it. It is a dark rabbit hole that you can fall down.
Yes.
Yeah.
But kind of what we were talking about at the beginning. You said it's on a spectrum.
Yeah.
So you could see someone might have all 9 of these traits and they're way far on this end.
Yeah.
And someone might just have a little too much arrogance in who they think they are.
Well, yeah.
And maybe not any of the others.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah. I mean, could you even think about something like the ones like demands excessive praise? And you're like, well, define excessive, right? Because, praise is nice in the sense of like you want to know that you did a good job.
Sure.
Those aren't terrible things. You want to know that you're a good husband or a good wife or a good mom or a good dad. Those aren't terrible things to want. So that's why that it does exist on a spectrum, right?
It's funny. So I'm going to confess something. Maybe I shouldn't.
Sure.
But my husband is an introvert and I'm an extrovert.
Right.
I like attention.
Yeah.
And one day, just jokingly, he's like, "How much attention do you need?" And I just said, "All of it."
Like, all of it. Yeah.
Is that asking too much? I want a parade when I get home. And he's like, "I don't need the welcome wagon." And I'm like, "Can you guys bang the drum and welcome me home? Yay, mom's home, boom, boom."
Yeah.
Anyway,
so you're checking a box.
Maybe I'm a narcissist.
Well, I said, if you do enough reading, you realize that the problem's not only out there. The problems is within all of us.
Sure.
And that becomes convicting, right? And truth be told, we're more responsible at the traits that are being developed inside of us than we are the ones that are being exhibited in the world.
Yes. Yeah, because we can't control the world, and we shouldn't expect the world to behave like Christians.
No, it's true, but it's also easier to identify.
Oh, sure.
in the world than it is to identify in us.
Yes.
Right? We can see the arrogance out there.
Yes.
It's hard to see the arrogance inside of us sometimes.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk culture.
Sure.
First of all, is our culture at large narcissistic? How so? And then we'll talk about the church.
Yeah, sure. There's been a lot of writing on this, which is that, we live in a very narcissistic culture, which is not surprising, especially when you talk about image, right? We live in a very image culture. You think about the disconnect between what's posted on social media. This happens all the time, right? The disconnect between what's posted on social media and the actual life that they're living.
Sure.
Right? According to their Instagram or their Facebook or whatever they have, their TikTok, their Twitter, they're living a far more interesting life than they're actually living.
Right.
So it would be natural that in an image-based culture that something like narcissism would be on the rise. But actually, so where the DSM-5 says if you have 5 of the 9 that are prevalent, you're probably dealing with narcissism, personality disorder. But to be told, like, of those 9, those are cultural values of ours.
Yeah.
These are things that we're teaching our children.
That's crazy because you and I were talking a little yesterday, and you said that, and it was almost like, oh my gosh, that.
Yeah.
I mean, because I work with family ministries, and I said to someone, a few weeks ago, the kids are just so entitled.
Yeah.
Like they think they can just walk in the room and, oh, there's a bucket of candy. Well, I can just go help myself.
Yeah.
It's like, what?
Yeah. So entitlement. So for instance, entitlement is one of those. You don't ever settle for second best.
Right.
You deserve the best.
Yeah.
You deserve the best. That's entitlement. Take the world. The world is yours for the taking.
Yeah.
That's entitlement.
Yeah.
And these are the things we're teaching them. A sense of uniqueness. You're very unique. A sense of specialness. A sense of unlimited power. You're unique, and you can do anything you want to do in this world. If you can dream it, you can do it. Right? And this sounds familiar.
I believe I can fly.
Right. Or even like we talk about like this sense of like grandiose importance. Like you're super unique. You're going to do something great and huge and magnificent in this world that only you can do.
Right.
And so go out and do it. Now, I think that
the parentheses in that isn't God's uniquely gifted you, so use your gifts for his glory. The parentheses is go do it so you can achieve for yourself.
Yeah.
So you can brag on Instagram you can for you, not for the betterment of anyone else.
Yeah, which is true. Yeah, it's absolutely true. And so we live in a culture where we go, man, we hate the narcissism. Or even think of something about like, now this isn't a cultural value, but it's increasingly so, the exploitive relationships, for instance. So people, nobody ever says, I want to get into a relationship to exploit the other person. Right? That just sounds terrible, because it is terrible.
It is terrible.
We use different terminology. In our culture today, we use terminology like you do you.
Yeah.
You do you, which is the inference there is I'll do me.
Yeah.
I'll do me and you do you. And I'm in this relationship as long as me doing me is beneficial. But the second me doing me is no longer beneficial,
bye.
I'm out. Yeah. So as soon as the relationship starts to cost me, I can bounce. And so then you have, at best, you have these relationships which lack intimacy. Why? Well, because there are these relationships that are based in mutual exploitation.
Yeah.
I do you. Sorry, no, you do you. I do me. And as long as that benefits each other, one another, you benefit from you doing you, and I benefit from me doing me.
Yeah.
We can be in relationship together. So we see these things that are prevalent in our culture. Now, by the way, the opposite isn't true, right? So if we tell like kids, so if the message has been, kids, you can do anything you put your mind to. You're uniquely gifted. You're going to do great things in this world that only you can do. The opposite is probably not helpful. If we start telling kids, well, you're nothing special,
you
kid.
Suck.
You're nothing special, kid. You're not going to amount to anything. And if you do amount to something, Well, that'll be a surprise.
I think that's called verbal abuse.
Yeah. So the opposite of that isn't true. It's just not like we should then reject, which is what we often do. We reject something and embrace the opposite.
We kind of do the pendulum swing.
Exactly, the pendulum swing.
Yeah.
So we don't want to do the pendulum swing with that. But to realize in our culture, we have really swung over to fulfill the traits of the narcissism culturally. So individually and culturally.
So let's talk about the church.
Sure.
How do churches display narcissism?
Well, yeah, so the church is a little tricky, as it always is tricky, but largely because some of it's true.
Yeah.
You know, you think about things like specialness, a sense of grandioseness, unlimited power. You know, I think
the Holy Spirit.
Yeah, the Holy Spirit. Yeah, I mean, yeah. So you think about, so the church is unique in the sense where it does have this special place that no other institution in the world can take place. Right. It can't take its place. It's and it has a very unique, grandiose job. I mean, Jesus says to begin the church, right? He says to these disciples that weren't going to really probably, unless they met with Jesus, they were never going to travel more than like 15 miles from their home. And he says, you're going to go to the world. Yeah. You're going to go to the world. So what's the mission, Jesus? The mission is you're going to take this thing to the world. You know, it's going to start in Jerusalem and it's going to go to the world. And by the way, the gates of hell cannot prevail against
Sounds
this
pretty
thing.
special.
Yeah, it's pretty special. It's pretty, and unlimited power. Like there's going to be success. And so there is, in a sense, within the Christian culture, a real sense of like, we are on a special mission that will not be stopped. Right. And so there's the healthy, as I would say, the healthy manifestations of those things. But they go sideways sometimes in the church, right? As everything tends to do.
Right. Because we're sinners.
Because we're sinners. But yeah, so you see the collective church, and so what happens a lot of times, sometimes can happen in churches, is the goodness and greatness. So what was true of the person, the protection and promotion of the false self is good and great to the detriment of the true self, is that whatever's being experienced individually, then it starts being experienced collectively.
Okay.
So then it's about the protection and promotion of the false self of the community or the church to the detriment of the true self. And probably I could give you some, I guess, threatening examples, but a non-threatening example would be, non-threatening example would be like a church that thinks they're very hospitable. Okay. And so, we're just, and they'll be really quick to show you all of the ways they're very hospitable. The problem is that everyone that comes in that's not a part of that community feels like they're very cold and cliquish. Okay. And
that's the false self.
That's the false self, that we're a hospitable church. And look at all of these things. And then the moment anybody would come in and say, I don't think that you are, we think that you're very cold and cliquish, they have to be, in order to continue to protect and promote the false self as good and great, they have to then reject the person. And so that's how those people will come in. There'll be an outside voice, outside ear for a little while. And unless they protect and promote the false self, they will then be, as we say, excommunicated. Yeah. Probably a more threatening one would be, say that, for instance, the case of sexual abuse. Okay. People think, well, how could sexual abuse continue on in a systematic way in a church community? And you go, well, because there's this, we need to protect and promote the false self, which is we are a good, great, loving church, loving community that would not harm anybody. Right. Except for you have all of these stories of harm and abuse. And then those have to be dismissed, buried, hidden, so that they can continue to protect. And even when those stories start to come to light, you go, well, we can't say this. You can't say that. We can't expose that. Yeah. Why? Well, because if that's exposed, then it's going to damage what people think about us. Our false self. Yeah. And ironically, and ironic enough, is that that's the only way for it to stop.
Yes, for it to be exposed.
Is for it to be exposed. Yeah.
So you were telling me an example yesterday of, let's say there's a church member
Yeah.
who you say, "Oh, tell me about your church," and they say,
Yeah.
"Oh, we're doing kids camp, and
yeah.
our high schoolers are going to LA, and
Yeah.
the college group's going to Mexico, and we're supporting this many missionaries." And so, tell me a little bit how you would handle that conversation.
Yeah, well, so that's because I'm as a pastor, I talk with people from other churches all the time, and sometimes even depending on the size of the church, I'll ask them what church do you go to, and if it's a very large church, it's almost like this prepare to be impressed.
Yes.
I go to and then fill in the blank. And I go, oh, and I said, so what are you guys doing right now? And they go, oh, well, we're doing our VBS, our kids camp. We're sending students to build churches in Mexico, and we're feeding the homeless, and we have this great discipleship program, and expository preaching, whatever it would be. Like they just tell all these great, wonderful things that their church is doing. Great, but then if I were to dig down deep, and I'd say, so do you go on any of those? Or are you a part of the discipleship program? No. Okay, do you financially support any of those projects? No. Do you financially support the church at all? No. So then I'm like, I don't ask these questions, but then I think so then exactly what are you doing?
Yeah.
And the answer is like, well, I go there. So your attendance. Yes, and you also bow your head when they pray for said events.
Yeah.
Yes, I bow my head and pray. Okay, great. And not to discount prayer.
Right.
But what they're doing is, in those moments, they're borrowing the goodness and greatness of the collective as healthy expressions, not as narcissistic expressions, as healthy expressions. They're borrowing that goodness and greatness and then applying it to themselves.
Would it almost be like me getting a famous athlete's jersey and thinking that, wearing it and thinking that I would deserve all the accolades that athlete deserves by wearing his jersey?
Yeah, I have to think about that. Yeah, maybe like a jersey, maybe maybe that, or feeling, I would say this, maybe feeling like you're part of the team, right? We won the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
We won the Super Bowl. Once again, that happens all the time, right? And I don't think there's necessarily probably at its basic level, nothing wrong with that. But it's like this, we won the Super Bowl. I'm like, what did you do? I watched them all season.
I cheered and I held my arm like this because the first time I did, they scored a touchdown. So
I know. Well,
I kept my arm like this the whole game.
Yeah, we all have that superstition, right? I stood in that one spot, and every time I moved from that spot, they started losing. So I was like, my job is to stay in that spot. Well played.
Yeah.
However, but that becomes the thing. So then what do we? So then you apply the goodness and greatness of the institution, in the sense the church, and I apply that to myself. So it actually gives me the sense that I'm doing good and great things without actually doing anything.
Yeah.
So, now the church isn't unique in that; it happens in other places.
Sure. Yes, of course.
Right.
Like if you work for a company or.
Yeah,
let's say you work for Google and you like clean up the trash, but you're claiming all these wonderful things about Google.
Or even like playing video games. Like, video games gives you the greatest sense of accomplishment without doing actually anything, right? It's like, what'd you do today? Well, I saved the world. In reality, I sat on my couch all day long.
Yes.
However, I did save the world.
Yes.
And so I think we're kind of wired this way.
Yeah.
I think we are wired this way. And so, so that also then makes its way into the church. That's what I want to say. It's not a church unique problem.
No.
It's an issue that it also manifests itself in the church.
Sure.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
And I would say, I would say that, unfortunately, because it ought to be the one place where it does not.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's say someone's listening.
Sure.
And they're thinking of someone that they're close to, maybe a spouse or a sibling or a parent or a coworker, and they're exhibiting 5 of the 9 or 7 or 6 or 8.
Yeah.
How do you respond to someone who seems to be a narcissist or exhibits the traits of a narcissist often?
Yeah. So for not going too deep into it, that's actually why I had to read a lot of it, because I was needing to navigate a relationship with the narcissist.
Wow.
And so I was trying to figure out, how do I do this? And I didn't know. And then somebody gave me a book that said, you might be a narcissist if. And I was like,
oh
wait. Like, no, you should read this.
Oh.
Like, oh, okay. That was helpful.
They
At
weren't
first, I
saying
was like,
you were a
wait a
yeah.
minute.
Oh.
Wait a minute. And so I think that, so sometimes you're required to. You're not always required to, but sometimes you are. In those cases, I think what most people do, and they maybe don't even know that they're doing this, they sense that there's a false self. They think the way to confront the narcissist is by showing them their true self.
Yeah.
Right? So, you say you're a truthful person. Here's the 20 times you've lied. And what they're hoping for is that in showing them the 20 times they lied, they realize they're a liar.
Right.
And they go, oh my gosh, I am a liar.
Yes.
You've been right this whole time.
Yeah.
The problem is that never happens.
Right.
It's always like, no, that wasn't a lie. Or there was a reason why. There's always a context and a reason and a justification that, by the way, they've already worked on it.
Right.
They are 4 steps ahead of you on that.
Ooh, yeah.
So they've already figured that out. So a lot of times people think it's to confront the narcissist with their false self.
Sure.
With their true self. And is what they have found is that anyone that's listening has done that. It wasn't super helpful.
Okay.
What they ended up getting was some sort of, like, as they call it, narcissistic rage, and that can look as lashing out. It can look at being avoidant. Actually, it can be the opposite. So it's not even lashing out. It's just like they totally ghosted me.
Oh.
Yeah, they're done with me, and it goes back to, why would they do that? Because they need to protect and promote.
Wow.
And if you've challenged that, they've got to do something with you. So it's not super helpful. So the 2 things that I recommend is establishing very, very clear boundaries. That can be established. Narcissists don't do well with boundaries. One of the things is they have unlimited power, right? And to then put boundaries on them actually limits their power.
Yeah.
Now, you can't limit their power out in the world, but you can hopefully limit their power with you. And so I would say establish some really clear boundaries. And there's Cloud and Townsend have done a lot of stuff with boundaries that is super helpful about how to establish clear boundaries. Because you're trying to limit their effect in life. And it's like I said, some of these relationships you can't help but be in, right? I mean, if you're married, if it's a parent or a child, I mean, those aren't decisions you get to either opt in or out of. So you have to figure out how to navigate. The other thing I would say is then cultivate, and this is the hard part, probably harder than establishing and keeping boundaries. Is cultivating empathy for them.
Okay.
I think one of the things we do with narcissists or narcissism is we call the person a narcissist so that it justifies our mistreatment of them.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Why would you do that? Because that's what they did to me. Why would you? Because they're such a narcissist. Like, all of a sudden, because they're a narcissist, all gloves are off. You can lie, cheat, and steal.
Yeah.
And so
you can exploit the relationship.
You can exploit them. Yeah, exactly. So what I would say is that cultivate empathy. It's the one thing that they cannot do.
Yes.
And I think often what the response is since you're going to withhold empathy from me, I'm going to withhold it from you. And truth be told, I think that part's been super helpful for me to see, because I don't know that world. At least, a narcissist loves their false self, rejects their true self.
Right.
And they just assume that everybody else would reject their true self too.
Yeah.
They can't accept it, and they just know for a fact everybody else would reject it too. They live in a very isolated and trapped world.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the story
and
of
when
narcissists.
you think about it, you would have empathy for that person.
Yeah, they're
what
trapped.
a sad, sorry existence.
They're trapped. Yeah, that's what I want to say. They're trapped. That's the whole thing. I mean, even with the myth narcissist, he's trapped. He cannot look away.
Yeah.
He's not free.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times we feel like they are free because they're quote unquote getting away with it.
Yeah.
But they're not getting away with it. They're trapped a lot of self-loathing, self-hatred,
Yeah.
a lot of shame.
Wow.
Yeah. So I would say cultivate empathy for them.
Okay.
Yeah. And then you focus in on the narcissist within, right?
Yeah.
It's like I said, it's easier to identify and deal with, quote unquote, the narcissist
What
out
you
there.
struggle with and not what I struggle with.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that is then to put to death the false self, and then to embrace your true self.
Yeah.
You know.
And if you are in Christ, your true self is
Absolutely.
Christ.
It's Christ.
It's
Yes.
beautiful.
It's very beautiful.
It's better than any false self you could create.
Yeah, which is what Jesus says, not a little bit, but a lot. But Jesus talks about, this you have to die to yourself in order to live, right?
Yep.
If only he would have said something really cool like that.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of what he's saying is that you have this false self that was, to use our terminology here, that was, or a self that was fractured at the fall. And you need to die to yourself in order to find life.
Yeah.
And so we see this. And so one of the things I encourage people is that you don't have to kill your false self to everybody, but you need to be killing it to somebody.
Yeah.
And I think that comes through the discipline of confession.
Yeah.
Right? I feel like there's two people in this world. The ones that confess to nobody, and the ones that confess to everybody.
Oh my gosh, that's so true. That's so true.
And nobody likes either one of those,
no.
right?
Confess to somebody.
Exactly. You should be confessing to somebody, because what the confession is doing is actively putting to death the false self.
Yeah.
And going, because I did my dissertation on preaching, and one of the things I talked about there is that even what pastors will do sometimes is they'll, I think inappropriately so, kill the false self to the whole church.
Yeah.
And I go, you don't actually have to do that.
Yeah.
What you do have to do is make sure that it's being killed with somebody.
Yeah.
With a close friend, so that and then embracing your true self, which is the one in Christ, which is forgiven, right? Which is redeemed.
Yeah.
Which is which is love, the child of God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And your unlimited power is in the Spirit, not in yourself.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
That's really cool.
So,
well, hey, I'm going to switch over to our Behold portion.
Sure, absolutely.
I'm going to read from Philippians 2. If then there is any encouragement in Christ, if any consolation of love, if any fellowship with the Spirit, if any affection and mercy, make my joy complete by thinking the same way, having the same love, united in spirit, intent on one purpose. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility consider others as more important than yourselves. Everyone should look not to his own interests, but rather the interests of others. Adopt the same attitude as that of Christ Jesus, who, existing in the form of God, did not consider equality with God as something to be exploited. Instead, he emptied himself by assuming the form of a servant, taking on the likeness of humanity. And when he had come as a man, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to the point of death, even to death on a cross. And I could go on and on.
Sure.
This is a beautiful
It's a beautiful passage.
But I'm thinking of Jesus, God, humbled himself to be made, fully God, fully man, but then assumed the form of a servant, humbled himself to the point of death.
Yeah, so you see there, especially in Philippians 2, where it just keeps going down, down, down.
Yeah.
So to be born, and then born into the likeness of man, but into a servant, and then to death, and death on a cross.
Yeah.
It's just
wah,
like,
wah,
yeah,
wah.
it would just be, you think about the humility of Jesus, right? And I think that, where he considered others more important.
Yeah.
I mean, Jesus is the one that goes, he could have demanded excessive admiration. It wouldn't be excessive,
No.
right? He does have all power, right? He does have unlimited success. And yet he lays all of that down. I mean, you think it, because even for us, we go, well, he was born, and that's not really a humble. I mean, I guess maybe it's a humbling thing.
Right.
But most people don't really think about being born as being humbling because they don't remember their own birth, right?
Right.
Certainly it's humbling, but what's more humbling with Jesus is so that he had the unlimited power. And then he puts himself in a position where he can't control his own bowels.
Yeah.
He has to have a diaper change. He has a feed. He can't even feed himself.
Yeah.
The omnipresent one puts himself in a position where he can't move. He can't walk.
Yeah.
He can't even crawl.
Well, for 9 months, he's in
Yeah.
in a womb.
Yeah, in a womb. The all-knowing one puts himself in a position where he can't talk.
Yeah.
And why does he do that? Well, he does that. He does that for us, and that's the path. That's the path. And so when what happens is then Jesus, the one that could have taken these traits and legitimately held them, he lays them all down.
Yeah.
And then what we do then as a people, individually and collectively, is we go back and we pick them all back up again.
Yeah.
And I just think it's not wise. We ought not to pick up the things that Jesus laid down.
Yes. Amen. Well, hey, Josh, thank you so much. I didn't
Sure.
call you Dr. Lane one
Wow,
time.
I appreciate
should
that.
have.
I appreciate that.
But we are so grateful that you've joined us. Thank you for
Thank
being
you.
our second
Wow.
time guest.
Well, now I have to come a third time just so I can be one up on
so
Jim.
you can beat Jim.
Yeah.
That's a goal in life, right?
Or maybe me and Jim can do it together.
That
That's
would be
what we'll do.
super fun.
Me and Jim would do it together. I'm not even sure if we'd get anything productive done. But
No, but it would be
be
fun.
fun the
It
whole
would be
way.
fun.
It would be fun the whole way.
All right. Well, thanks for listening and watching. Be sure to subscribe, comment, like. If you have questions or thoughts, send us emails, behold@arcadechurch.com. Until next time, take care.